Hello, and welcome to Stories from India. This is a podcast where we talk about myths, legends, and folk tales from India. I am your host, Narad Muni, and am a mythological character myself. I have the gift of eternal life and knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. By profession, I'm a traveling musician and a storyteller. So the way I'm doing my job is by podcast. In this episode, we are going to cover a story that one of you listeners requested. This story is about Tilottama, a rather extraordinary Apsara. There are actually many stories featuring Tilottama, but we are only going to cover the main one. We'll see how an architect and builder can also construct people and not just buildings. We'll also see the consequences of yet another of my father's generous wishes gone all wrong. This story starts not with Tilottama, but with me. Very much like our last story about Shibi, this is a story within a story. And just like the previous one, today's story also happens within the Mahabharata. I was in conversation with the Pandav brothers. Now, because we haven't reached that part of the story in our coverage of the Mahabharata, I'll go a little light on the details to avoid giving away anything. Let me just say that I was trying to tell the Pandavas all the things that can go wrong if brothers got married to the same woman. I told them that I had no better example of such a situation than that of Tilottama and Sundar and Upasundar. "Friends of yours?" asked Bhim, lazily. It was obvious he was looking to cut the story short. He didn't really seem to care. After yet another extra large meal, a nap seemed more attractive to Bhim than a story. Arjun grumbled about needing to go practice his archery. Nakul and Sahadev mentioned that they had to feed the horses. Yudhishthir stepped up to my defense, thankfully. "Now, brothers, we should at least listen to what Narad has to say. Narad knows everything. Just look at his podcast listeners, for example. Listening to him once a week has made them so much wiser." And just like that, all their objections disappeared. The story within the story began with two Asur brothers, Sundar and Upasundar. Their father was Nikumbha, who may not have been very interesting himself, but whose namesakes certainly were very interesting. A different Nikumbha was Ravan's nephew. Yup, Ravan, the mega villain of the Ramayana. A third Nikumbha terrorized Krishna's granddaughter and fought with Arjun and Krishna. Yes, the very same Arjun who was listening to the story now. It's a small world indeed. All three Nikumbhas fell into the villain category and not the hero one. In Sundar and Upasundar's case, you could certainly say that these twin apples did not fall far from the tree. That was totally not the case with their grandfather, Prahlad, and great-grandfather, Hiranyakashipu. We had talked about these two characters in episode 20. But the TLDR is that Hiranyakashipu was evil. Prahlad was not. Until later he was. And then he was good again. I just realized that if I have to hunt for a pop culture reference to explain Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad, the Star Wars characters Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker most fit the bill. Sundar and Upasundar were not Kylo Ren, to continue the Star Wars analogy. They were also not Siamese twins. They were technically two separate individuals, but they lived exactly identical lives, just as Siamese twins might. They always dressed exactly the same. They ate exactly the same food. They even slept in the same bedroom. In schools, they used exactly the same textbooks, turned in exactly identical homework assignments, and scored identical grades without being accused of cheating. Now, like I said, their father was a baddie, for sure. Their grandfather, Prahlad, was okay, at least in childhood. But again, the great-grandfather was evil. So you might think that given the flip-flopping, it was their turn to be good again. For Sundar and Upasundar, their choice of being a hero or a villain was undecided at that time. The one thing they had learned from the experience of all the Asurs ever was that when you pray to the gods and goddesses and ask for a wish, said gods and goddesses trick you. It happened to Kumbhakarna. It happened to their great-grandpa, Hiranyakashipu. So the plan they came up with was to be smarter than the gods. They did all of the usual things. Number 1, finding a suitable mountain. They chose a mountain in the Vindhyas instead of the Himalayas. This choice had to do with number 2, the choice of God to whom to pray to. They chose Brahma, the creator of the universe. Quick sidebar here, Brahma is also my dad. Anyway, Brahma is notoriously easy to please. He goes out of his way to grant you wishes. So Brahma certainly wouldn't mind visiting them in the Vindhyas. To pray to someone like Shiva, the destroyer, they would have had to go to the Himalayas. Sundar and Upasundar prayed on their chosen mountain for days. That was usually enough with Brahma, and it was enough in this case as well. Brahma appeared faster than even they had expected, but he explained that it was because he was checking off more in a single visit. Because here, there were 2 people praying to him instead of the usual 1. Sundar and Upasundar were ready when Brahma asked what he could do for them. "Make us immortal," the twins said, in one voice. Brahma said, Sure, anything you boys want." Now, I'm forced to ask one question. The other gods made me do it. So I'll ask you. Are you planning to use your new power to fight against the Devs, take over Swarg, and to declare yourselves kings of Swarg? "No," said Sundar and Upasundar, which was technically the truth. They were planning on declaring themselves emperors, not kings. "Oh well, that's good enough for me," Brahma said. He flipped through a deck of cards he had. Power to disappear, power to evaporate the oceans, power to destroy mosquitoes, power to change water to wine, power to walk on water, power to appear in people's dreams. I don't see the card for immortality. I must have run out of those. No prizes to you listeners for guessing why. Sorry, boys, I can't do immortality. Not today. It'll take me a day or 2 to make that up. The twins suggested that they could wait a day or two. That wasn't a problem. You don't understand, Brahma explained. It'll take a day or two for me, and 12 of my hours are 4.32 billion years for you. So, no, you really can't wait a day or two, seeing as by then the earth will have been engulfed by the sun becoming a red giant before its eventual demise as a white dwarf. Given ancient Indian science wasn't very advanced, none of this made any sense to the twins. But they had prepared for the possibility that Brahma could not make them immortal. So they switched their request to something else. They wanted Brahma to make it the only way Sundar could be hurt was if Upasundar hurt him, and vice versa. Done, said Brahma. And sorry I can't stay. I've already spent almost a nanosecond here. That's too long for me, even with the 2 in 1 visit. Bye. Sundar and Upasundar were gleeful. Their plan had worked perfectly. They were practically immortal now, because no matter what happened, they would not hurt each other. So they tested it by deliberately stubbing their toes on a rock, by hitting themselves with a club, and increasingly dangerous stunts. The only thing that hurt Sundar was when Upasundar did something to him, or vice versa. Once they had done these experiments, they proceeded to do exactly what Brahma thought they had promised not to do. Sundar and Upasundar declared war on everyone and everything that stood in their way. Their goal was to restore Hiranyakashipu's glory, and they seemed well on the path to doing that. Except something happened. Something they hadn't anticipated. And it was thanks to Vishwakarma. Brahma realized that he had made a mistake when a crowd of devs showed up at his doorstep. It goes to show how trigger-happy Brahma is with his wish-granting, that it took him a long while to understand whom they had come to complain about. But he assured the crowd that just like always, he had built a vulnerability, an Achilles heel, so to speak. Still, that wasn't winning him any favors with this crowd. Finally, Brahma tried to pull me in to do crowd control. Unfortunately, I got the wrong idea and thought that he was asking me to play a song for them. That misunderstanding cleared up quickly enough, with some strong boos. So, you all want a way to defeat Sundar and Upasundar, yeah? I asked. Yes, chorused the devs. I see. Then you want to work it so that someone comes along and sparks a fight between the two. Some devs scoffed at the idea. Don't be ridiculous, Narad. Nothing will get those two to fight. Then I suggested if perhaps that was because they had never experienced love and jealousy. That got the crowd thinking. We did a bit of research, pulled out their high school yearbooks, and talked to their classmates. No one remembered any romantic situation that either twin had been involved in. So that's how you want to solve this thing then, I said. But it was easier said than done. No one could think of any Apsara or woman who would agree to start a fight between the two. So a bit more brainstorming later, Brahma, the creator of the universe, said, Why don't we create such an Apsara? Now that was an idea everyone liked. But despite that, everyone balked when Brahma suggested that he be the one to create this Apsara. They said, hadn't Brahma done enough damage already? So the Devs requested Vishwakarma, the celestial architect and builder, to build them a woman. Vishwakarma objected. He could build palaces, bridges, dams, houses, and various forms of intricate machinery. But he said he couldn't build a woman. We all insisted that yes, he could. Brahma even passed him a recipe. So Vishwakarma gathered all the ingredients from everywhere, and Brahma breathed life into the woman Vishwakarma had carefully constructed from those ingredients. These ingredients were a little bit of the best of everything. And that's what the word Tilottama means. Tilottama knew right away what she must do. Unlike normal human beings who would have required a few years of parental care, followed by K-12 education and then university, Tilottama was born ready, literally. She went straight to the Vindhya mountains, where, she was told, the brothers were hanging out. She spied them from a distance. They were near a river bank, and they were heavily drunk, which worked perfectly for her plan. She began picking flowers, and gradually appeared into their view.
"Who's that lovely maiden?"
asked Sundar.
"I don't know,"
Upasundar said.
"but she is lovely indeed. Let's go talk to her, and maybe abduct her if we need to." "Upasundar, you're straight to the point as usual,"
his brother replied.
"I think we should abduct her and only talk to her if we have to."
So they walked over, and each Asur grabbed one of her arms, and then hesitated. They were awestruck. They had never seen someone this beautiful. They didn't know it was possible for someone to be this mesmerizing. Tilottama anticipated this. "Are you two big, strong men here to help me collect flowers?"
"Only if you agree to a cup of coffee with me,"
both brothers said, and then stopped and stared at each other, surprised by their own reactions. They were used to grabbing whatever they wanted. Why were they trying hard to be charming? But the bigger thing is that the brothers missed that neither of them had asked for a coffee with us. They had said me. Odd that they didn't realize it right away. "Of course I will," said Tilottama. "But I can only spend a limited amount of time. So how about I have coffee with whichever one of you brings me back more flowers in 5 minutes?" No sooner had she said it, Sundar and Upasundar both scrambled to collect as many flowers as they could. And they returned in 5 minutes. Despite the inherent indeterminism of this exercise, Sundar and Upasundar came back with an identical number of flowers. So it was a tie. Now, a reasonable step forward was for them to find a polite, gentlemanly way to break the tie. But not so with these belligerent Asurs. Sundar accused Upasundar of cheating. He said one of the purple flowers was missing a petal, so that flower should not count, and Sundar should be declared the winner. Upasundar countered by saying that the stems of the flowers that Sundar had collected were not all even.
"You can't make proper arrangements with those. unless the stems lined up exactly.
So, according to Upasunda, Sundar's flowers should not count. This escalated when Sundar said that it had been the same even back in school. When Upasunda got the same grade, even though he had spelled a word incorrectly and Sundar hadn't. It was clearly unfair. Upasunda had a few other counter arguments. And just like that, a lifetime of tiny differences came pouring out. This deep-seated resentment eventually led to blows. They got their clubs out, and later their swords. Long story short, they solved the world's problems by eliminating each other. The Devs were especially pleased with Tilottama. Brahma granted her the power of being able to travel anywhere she wanted. It's a good superpower to have. I know. I have it myself. So as I concluded telling this story to the Pandavas, I waited for a reaction. When it came, it was not quite what I was expecting. Arjun said,
I don't really see how this is the same as our situation with Draupadi. We don't have deep-rooted psychological problems with each other, and we are not going to fight over it. True, said Bhim. And even if we did, we don't really have the time to fight each other. We have 100 evil cousins. They'll keep us busy for a long while.
Nakul and Sahadev looked at each other. And then Nakul said, if this was meant more for me and Sahadev, because we are twins, rest assured, we aren't like Sundar and Upasunda. Sahadev and I have practically polar opposite views on everything. We both like horses, but that's about the only thing we agree on. Sahadev nodded eagerly. Clearly, the polar opposite view didn't apply in this case. Yudhishthir was the last to speak.
Thank you for that story, Narad. Honestly, I don't think it will help us. I think it's better if you tell it to your podcast audience instead.
So that's why you're hearing this story, folks. That's all I have on that. There are many other stories of Tilottama, including one about her rebirth and a different variation in which she tried enchanting Shiva, which also happened in another peripheral story in the Mahabharata. There are also stories of her rebirth as the demon Banasur's daughter. There is a story of her as a widow who prayed to the gods to be reborn as an Apsara. And yet another story which actually features an encounter with Durvas, the toughest house guest who judges and curses everyone. I hope to cover some of these other stories in future episodes. Now, next week is technically episode number 177. But if you combine all the bonus and mini episodes, it'll actually be episode number 200, which for me is just another reason to celebrate. Garud was character of the week at the very beginning of the show, so it's only fitting that we cover Garud's story next. If you have comments or suggestions, or if there are particular stories you would like to hear, please do let me know by leaving a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com or tweet at sfipodcast. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get notified automatically of new episodes. A big thank you to each and every one of you for your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.